Step aside, +1. We've got a new seasonal event in town. Hey, what's up everybody? It's Lids, and we are back for some more Gwent, the Witcher-themed card game, and today we are going to check out the new, with an asterisk, dual casting seasonal event in which we play a copy of every special card that we play. This has replaced the old +1 seasonal event, which got cut short. It was supposed to run through the rest of December, after that event was perhaps just a little too broken, and you can check out my most recent video as to why that may have been the case. So this dual casting event was also the seasonal event for the month of June, so it will be similar to that. However, there are many new cards in the game that were not available to us back in June that now are very powerful in this round of dual casting. So let me show you the deck that we're going to use today, featuring many of those new cards, and maybe you can guess what the centerpiece is going to be. Alright, so the deck that we're going to use today will be a Scoia'tael Guerilla Tactics deck built around the Alzur card. The reason why this card is so important for this seasonal event is because, what with us playing additional copies of every special card that we play, we are incentivized to use some very powerful special cards in our deck. Sure, that means we can load up on those big special cards, yes, but it also means that we want to try to find units that complement those special cards, and no unit is better at doing that than Alzur here. Whenever we play a spell card, we spawn a random unit with the same provision cost on this row. So that means if we have some really high provision cost spells, we can spawn in some really powerful units to go along with them. And that is another way that we can complement some of the weaknesses you might find in other decks that you might be using for this seasonal event, where because you're focusing so much on the special cards, you don't have many units. This is a way to make sure that we get some really strong units too. The only thing is, because it's a random unit with the same provision cost, we don't really know what we're going to get, and so it could be something fantastic, it could be something horrendously awful, but that's part of the fun. So the first card in our deck will be Oneiromancy. This is one of the highest provision cost spells, so it complements Alzur extremely well. It also allows us to play any card from our deck, which means that if we don't have Alzur in our hand, we can absolutely get him using this card here, in addition to being able to get any other card that we might want. Next, we have Renew, which is a 12 provision cost spell, so another one that works very well with Alzur. We play a unit from our graveyard with a provision cost of 9 or less and give it Doomed. Notably, Alzur does have an 11 provision cost, so that means that unfortunately we cannot play Alzur from our graveyard, otherwise we'd be able to play Alzur in 2 rounds and our deck would be way too powerful. So we will need to settle for other cards to play from our graveyard. However, if we play Alzur in the first round, spawn some incredibly powerful units when we do use high provision cost spells to go along with him, those big powerful units will be in our graveyard, and we may be able to play some of those with Renew as long as they have 9 provision cost or less. Next, we have Alzur himself. We've already spoken about him. Next, we have Korathi Heatwave, which is an extremely powerful special card that banishes any unit or artifact. This would be a way of getting rid of our opponent's most powerful unit, which in this game mode is likely that there's only 1 or 2 of those because our opponent is also likely to be using a very special heavy deck. Next, we have Royal Decree, which is another way to get Alzur out of our deck because it allows us to play any unit from our deck. With a 10 provision cost, it also means that if we already have Alzur out there, this is another way to create a powerful unit to go along with him. Next, we have Triangle Within a Triangle, which is another powerful spell that allows us to boost an ally by its provision cost, or damage an enemy by its provision cost. And because this card has 9 provision cost, that means that if we already have Alzur out there, we are spawning in a unit with 9 provision cost, which is the most powerful unit that we can create that will still be revivable using Renew. Next, we have Alzur's Double Cross, which is another powerful spell. It allows us to play the highest unit from our deck, which would be Alzur, so this is another way of making sure that we can get him on the playing field. And bear in mind, any of these cards that allow us to get Alzur onto the playing field, because they're all special cards, we play one of them, that allows us to get Alzur out there, and then when we create a copy of that card and play that one, then that does mean that we will also trigger Alzur's ability, so we can double up a bit in that regard. Next, we have Bekker's Rockslide, which is another high damage special card here, allowing us to damage unit by 8. It also has 8 provision costs, so it's another way to create a powerful unit to go alongside Alzur, and it would be a unit that could be revivable using Renew. Next we have Selective Mutation, which allows us to draw a card with Adrenaline from our deck. We haven't seen any of them yet, but there are a few that are further down on our list. And then it also spawns a couple of Witcher students in both of our allied rows. Because this is a very special heavy deck, does mean that at times we will be struggling a bit to find units to play, so this is a way of making sure that we can also get some of those out there, in addition to getting some of the other cards that we want to make sure that we have in our hand. Next we have the Sage, and this is one of the reasons why we wanted to use Scoia'tael, because this is one of the best cards for this seasonal event. Whenever you play a special card, it boosts itself by 2, which may not sound like a lot, but remember, we're playing 2 of every special card that we play, so this will add up very quickly. So if we already have Alzur out on the playing field, or if we've already used Alzur in a previous round, then this will likely be the best card for us to be building around. Next we have the Morana Runestone, which is another special card that allows us to create and play a Bronze Scoia'tael faction card, which is useful because since we are such a special heavy deck, we are going to be low on the units, and so this is a way of making sure that we can get more of them out there if necessary. Of course, this is going to be a random unit that we spawn within the Scoia'tael faction, yes, but there's a lot of uncertainty as to what exactly it will be. Next we have Adrenaline Rush, which boosts an allied unit by 8 if there are no other units in that row. And because we're going to have so few units out there, this should be very achievable. You just may need to play it a little bit on the early side before, say, you have Alzur and start spawning in a bunch of additional units. Next we have Waylay, which is a strong Scoia'tael damaging special card. It damages an enemy unit by 3, and then if we take out a unit in the process, then we spawn an Elven Deadeye in a random row. And this is helpful because, since we're playing 2 copies of this card, makes it a little bit easier to get the killing blow. And then, because we're low on the unit cards, that's also a way of making sure that we get a few more out there. Next we have Circle of Life, which is also a special card that deals 3 damage. However, in this case, we can boost a Scoia'tael unit in our hand by 2, or if we manage to destroy a unit with this card, then we can choose exactly which card we want to boost. Next, we start getting down to the units, and as you can see here, we haven't seen many units because we are generally saving those for our lower provision cost cards. The Dol Blathanna Sentry, though, is a card that could potentially be worth building around if necessary, because we are using Guerilla tactics, so we are capable of using our leader ability to move some units around. When we play this card in the melee row, whenever an enemy unit moves, we damage it by 1. Whenever we play this card in the range row, whenever an allied unit moves, we boost it by 1. Next we have the Dryad Matron, and every allied turn on turn end, it moves all the way to the rightmost spot and then boosts the allied unit to the left by 1. So this card does move, and therefore it does work well with the card that we just saw, and if you can play multiple of these at the time, then they will swap back and forth and boost each other, which is another useful synergy. Then, to further emphasize the movement, we have the Cat Witchers, which at the end of their turn will move themselves to the other row and damage an enemy unit on the other row by 1. If we have 4 or fewer cards in our hand, then the amount of damage bumps up to 2. These are also Adrenaline cards, so we can get them via Selective Mutation. Next, we have the Cat Witcher Mentor, and when we play this card, it boosts itself by the number of cards in that row, and if we have 4 or fewer cards in our hand, then whenever a card appears in that row, it'll boost itself by 1. That means that when Cat Witchers move around and end up in this row and we have fewer than 4 cards, it'll get boosted then. Next, we have the Vrihedd Dragoon, and at this point we're getting down to the cards that we, for the most part, don't want to see in our hand, but this one is here in case we find ourselves spawning a unit that is very powerful with Alzur that ends up in a row in which we don't want it to be in. Then this would be a way of moving that card to either the melee or range row in order to activate that ability, or maybe it's an ability that we actually don't want to have active, in which case we could deactivate it by moving that card to the other row instead. Lastly, we have the Elven Swordmaster, which is actually a very powerful card for just 4 provisions. When we play it in the melee row, it can damage an enemy unit by 1, and then it has a cooldown of 2. If and when we play an elf, we can decrease that cooldown by 1. So that's a look at the deck, and the general theme is, of course, to focus on the special cards and units that benefit most from those special cards. We do have enough movement and movement synergies that the hope there is that when we've already played Alzur and or the Sages, we'll have just enough power to eke out another victory. Okay, so we're going against Nilfgaard here, and they will go first. And in terms of what to expect from Nilfgaard, they have a lot of lock, so they might be able to lock down almost all of our units here. That would potentially be a concern. Potentially even seizing units. As for what we have Alzur, that is always a big pickup. Then we would like to pair him ideally with Oneiromancy, and we don't have it at the moment. Could we perhaps get rid of something like a Cat Witcher to make that happen? That indeed. Okay, so this is probably our best combination here. We'd like to play Alzur early, trigger that with a high provision cost spell like Oneiromancy, and then from here, maybe Renew. We want to get rid of that because unlikely we'd get one of our stronger units into our graveyard at this stage. Probably want to save that for round 2 or 3. And look at that! There's a familiar face. Our opponent also using Alzur. Okay, so on this occasion, as much as we would like to also get our Alzur out there as soon as possible, I think instead what we do is we opt to immediately destroy Alzur with Circle of Life. First one will deal 3 damage. That won't be enough, but the second one will, of course, provide another 3 damage. So I think we do this. And then this way, we can also choose a unit in our hand to boost. And why don't we go with, I do like boosting our Sage because it is a little bit vulnerable in that as soon as we play it, it's going to be a target of whatever damage our opponent has. And that is the risk in this game mode, is that as soon as you play a unit, there's enough damage out there that your opponents could very well immediately destroy something. In fact, even this 11 strength, about to be 12 strength, unit here, we could opt to immediately destroy with something like a Bekker's Rockslide. In fact, we have more than enough damage to do that. So I would argue maybe better to wait. Could also use something like a Korathi Heatwave to make that happen, but also, because we're playing 2 copies of all these cards, best to wait until our opponent gets a little bit more out there. Now, we could opt to play our own Alzur, that is true, but of course, we are also at risk of our opponent doing precisely what we just did to them, so that makes me a little bit nervous until we see just how many special cards our opponent has and what type of special cards they have. But I suppose only one way to know for certain, so what we can do is let's play him, and then I think it is actually worth it for us to bump him around a little bit with our leader ability, and in the process, boost him all the way up to a 10. That means that if our opponent does have sources of damage, our hope here is that we have made Alzur strong enough that he can tank some of those hits. And instead we see that our opponent is opting to lock, as anticipated. Now, unfortunately, with this deck, I don't believe I opted to throw in any Purification. There are some low provision cost spells that do just that. So, in that case, that does hurt quite a bit. Though we could certainly still make something work here with something like the Sage, which is very similar to Alzur in that it also benefits from us playing as many special cards as we can. We are, if we do this, of course, at risk of our opponent doing exactly the same thing and locking the Sage as well. But at this point, Alzur's already been boosted, Sage has already been boosted, so even if they do get locked, we're still in a decent place here, and we could even do something like destroy the Eskel Pathfinder out here and seriously reduce the amount of strength that our opponent has. Because this will continue to grow with each passing turn. The thing is, Bekker's Rockslide is still a little bit much if we are using both of these cards on Eskel Pathfinder, whereas Korathi Heatwave would be good for 1 round of that on Eskel Pathfinder, but then to use the second round on either a Kingslayer or Van Morlehem Hunter is not much. So I'm not feeling great about that one. I think what we do here is instead, let's use Adrenaline Rush on the Sage, because it will give it an 8 boost, and also the Sage will boost itself by 2 every time we play a special card, so that'll get it all the way up to 28. And here we challenge our opponent to do something big, and yes, that they do. In fact, they've stolen both of our cards, including Alzur. Okay, that is concerning. Our opponent has played 1 more card than us. I think on this occasion, what we do is we pass, take the round 1 loss. We know what to expect in round 2. They will, I would assume, play that Alzur card that they just took from us. We do, however, have something like a Korathi Heatwave to perhaps immediately destroy it. So I think with our card advantage here, we hope that that is enough, especially after destroying that Alzur, to take a round 2 victory, and then round 3, who knows? Okay, so we drew into our other Sage. That is definitely big. We still have Oneiromancy, so we can do whatever we want with that. So that gives us a lot of flexibility. Trying to think about what we might want to do with that. Maybe even get a Dol Blathanna Sentry and go with a serious movement setup. I believe we have 1 Cat Witcher in our hand at the moment. That we do. I don't love the Elven Swordmaster. Let's try swapping that out. And Morana Runestone is less predictable, but does give us 2 copies of a unit, so let's give that a shot. And this may turn into a bit of a throwaway round if our opponent only plays 1 or 2 cards here. I'm expecting likely Alzur at some point in time, or maybe they save it for round 3. They're leading off with an Alba Pikeman. This is one of their low provision cost cards, and when they lead off with that, when it deals damage in the melee row, that is basically just an invitation for us to only play cards in the range row. So I think this is largely just a throwaway card here. In which case, why don't we... I mean, we could just destroy it with Waylay, and in the process, we could spawn an Elven Deadeye in a random allied row, which I think is not a bad thing. That reduces their strength down to 0 and gives us a little bit of strength in the process as well. And that may be the type of thing we're looking for here, is just get a little bit on the board in order to take a quick round 2. Okay, so this card gets boosted whenever we boost one of our own units. It is a very strong card to counter against a deck like Northern Realms that boosts all over the place. We don't have that many boosts. Do we have enough damage to get rid of it? We could potentially, with something like Korathi Heatwave for sure, or the Bekker's Rockslide. Either of those would be a bit overkill. So I think what we do here is instead, we opt for something like Morana Runestone. We don't know what we're going to get out of it, but we will get 2 cards. And that should at least be enough for us to surpass our opponent here. So I think we want to try to not go with something that gets boosted, and ideally go with something that deals damage. Brocklin Sentinel is perhaps not very strong, but it will be enough for us to surpass our opponent. And then the second round gives us Nature's Rebuke, which we could use to destroy that card. Sure, let's go for it. This will not get copied because that is the second special card that we played this turn. So it may have actually been better for us to take one of those units here. But we'll see if our opponent continues to play cards. They are, of course, now at a deficit and still at card disadvantage. And this is one of the dangers with this game mode, is that as soon as you play a unit, there is enough capability with doubling every special card to remove most of them. And Alzur, well, certainly going to try to get rid of him. And we do certainly have a way of making that happen. The question is, do we feel bold enough to wait, or do we use a special card that we can use the 1 copy on him and throw away the 2nd copy on precisely no one, assuming that either a Bekker's Rockslide or something like a Korathi Heatwave would be able to take him out in 1 hit? Depends what they do here, though, and they do get Scoia'tael. Okay, so that is the reason why previously I was saying that sometimes it makes sense to play Alzur in the range row, because if you do play Oneiromancy, that means that you will end up creating a 13 provision cost unit, and one of those 13 provision cost units is Scoia'tael. And on this occasion, our opponent actually does not want this to happen, because Scoia'tael, of course, destroys the lowest unit on side with the most units, and our opponent has more units than us. So they are destroying their own units with this card. So in many ways, they have created a monster that they cannot contain. So I think we actually may not want to destroy Scoia'tael here, and we may still want to get rid of Alzur, though. In that case, how do we destroy Alzur and leave Scoia'tael? If we do that, then they will have 2 cards remaining, because we'll play a card that gets used twice, and we'll have 2 cards ourselves. So I think for that reason, we go with something like Bekker's Rockslide on Alzur, on the Magnan Division, because this card will continue to get boosted. So would the Ducal Guard, that is true. But I'm a little bit less concerned about this. It would have been a nice synergy to go along with Alzur, playing a bunch of cards that are not originally from their deck. But after having gotten rid of Alzur, I'm doubtful that that will happen. Or at least it'll be a lot more difficult for them to make that happen. They do still have a lead here, so they very well could pass. And I'd argue that may even be the best play here. Oh, and here's the Sage that they stole from us. Except, there you have Scoia'tael destroying the card that they just played. So once again, it is backfiring on them. So we, however, do not particularly want to play any units right now. Otherwise, suddenly we are the ones who would get bitten by Scoia'tael. And we are starting to run a little bit low on special cards. We could Oneiromancy. If we were to Oneiromancy, could we do that into any special cards? Yes, we could. But they'd be special cards for the most part that lead to playing other units. So for that reason, I think what we want to do here is now we probably do in fact destroy Scoia'tael and the Ducal Guard and use our Korathi Heatwave It's useful on Keltelis, yes. It is probably overkill on the Ducal Guard, certainly. But that is part of what happens here in this game mode, in which the first time you use a special card, it is probably the way in which you want to use it. The second time, maybe less so, but here you see our opponent has passed because, yes, we have thwarted what could have been a very strong round for them, but the Keltelis play backfired on them big time. We were able to destroy Alzur immediately after that. Okay, and we do still have a one-card advantage here, so that is big as well. We do have a Sage, that's also helpful. We have Oneiromancy, so we can play any card we want from our deck. What would that card be? Potentially more special cards, that way we can make sure that we can boost that Sage even more. Renew is now probably relevant because we want to see if we can get something out of our discard pile, and what would that be? We don't have many units in there. In fact, we have precisely one unit in there, so not a lot to work off of. That might be reason to play our units early and aggressively here. I think we want to get rid of our Elven Swordmaster, though. Vrihedd Dragoon is also not great. Catwitcher is good, though. So I think what we do here is we lead off with the Dol Blathanna Sentry, and that way we are boosting the Catwitcher and the Dryad Matrons once those start moving. We even have two Catwitchers in our hand. Okay, so we are very movement-centric right now, and we are very unit-heavy right now. But we will use Oneiromancy to get into Renew, and we can either bring back any card that our opponent destroys, or bring back the Brokilon Sentinel that is currently in our graveyard, and that'll be the way that we boost the Sage, but this will actually not be a very Sage-centric round here, I don't think. Let's Dol Blathanna Sentry in the range row. That's where it will boost our own units when they move. We don't have a lot of damage remaining at this point. We used just about all of it in rounds 1 and 2. That does mean that we don't have as many ways of countering what our opponent does. This is largely just going to be us doing our own thing. And so that is a little bit concerning to see that our opponent is not doing that. They are instead sabotaging our own plays. And the damage to Dol Blathanna Sentry is concerning because we can boost it a little bit with, say, something like a Dryad Matron. But for the most part, at this point, we're looking at slow build-up to the amount of boost that we're applying. Ideally, our next card would be another Dol Blathanna Sentry, and then we'd start putting in the movers. But I think in the interest of trying to keep Dol Blathanna Sentry alive, let's play this Dryad Matron. I'm not sure there's going to be a huge difference between the Dol Blathanna Sentry having 2 life versus 3 life. We could also potentially use a leader ability to move it, but we very much want it in the range row here. Oh, and damaging every unit in the row by 2 twice, mind you, is absolutely enough to get rid of the Dol Blathanna Sentry. It is just barely enough to keep the Dryad Matron. So those are the types of cards that standard game modes, they aren't that special, but being able to play them twice is just such a huge difference maker for those. So I think we do play our other Dol Blathanna Sentry. Technically should have played that over there where Dryad Matron would have hopped over and boosted it. I realized that as soon as I dropped that card down. And so if our opponent has more damage, then of course we are vulnerable to that, and Oneiromancy means that they could do anything they want here. Okay, and it did seem like they had some Viper Witcher School cards earlier on, though we only saw a little bit of it. Now perhaps they're going to go much further down that route, and Alzur's Thunder, that is certainly dangerous here to take out a card that we very much wanted to keep. We can still go with the movement setup, yes, but it is not going to be nearly as effective as it was when we had all those Dol Blathanna Sentries. However, what we can do here is we can go with, I think we want to do Sage, and then we will use Oneiromancy into Renew, and use Renew to bring back those Dol Blathanna Sentries. We just want to have the Sage out there first, so that way the Sage is benefiting from when we play all the special cards. I'll play him in the melee row, then I will use our last Guerilla tactics here to bump them, get boosted in the process, and at that position, the Dryad Matron will also swap places and boost by 1, so makes the Sage a little bit more difficult to take out. This does unfortunately mean that it's going to take us a lot longer to get out all of our movement cards, and so they will have far less time in which to do all the moving. There's another Oneiromancy. That is another benefit to playing the Echo cards like Oneiromancy, is that when you play one of them, you create a copy of it and play it, and then you get both echoed copies ending up in your deck, and so you get 2 Oneiromancies in the next round. So that is, in many ways, reason enough to play Oneiromancy early, even if you don't strictly need it. I'd argue that is a very early Yrden that doesn't do much for you. In fact, it's actually boosting us for one of our cards. But sure, okay, you'll boost Geralt as well. You have only 3 cards remaining here, so they don't have much more time. They did take the lead with that, but we do have card advantage. So let's Oneiromancy now. We will use Oneiromancy to get us Renew. And with Renew, we will play this. And then we will get a Dol Blathanna Sentry. Unfortunately, Renew was our second special card, so that means that we will not be able to get our second Dol Blathanna Sentry back. So we could use our second of our Oneiromancies to get a Royal Decree. And use Royal Decree to bring in, not entirely sure which unit we want here. Or this is the Dol Blathanna Sentry. Let's put that there. Royal Decree into, how about a Catwitcher Mentor? Because we will have some movement happening later on. Technically, I should have played that in the range row. I was thinking, well, we'll end up putting the Catwitchers here, and then they'll start moving into this row. But on the deploy, it gets boosted based on the number of cards in the row. By playing that series of cards there, we played a lot of specials, and that meant that the Sage got boosted a lot. Some straightforward boosts there. And that is one of the cards that I think is perhaps worth adding to our deck here, because it not only boosts but removes lock, and as we saw previously, our opponent was locking Alzur, which was problematic. So now we can go with either the Dryad Matron or the Catwitcher. Catwitcher gives us a little bit more damage. Dryad Matron is more straightforward boosting. Let's go with the straightforward boosting for now. Then we'll get into Catwitchers, because it's not like we're about to be able to destroy any of those cards. Oh, tell you the truth, though, we should have used the Catwitcher, because then the Catwitcher would have bumped into the melee row and started boosting the Catwitcher Mentor. That was the reason why I was initially thinking we put him there, but just a series of minor misplays, and we could have perhaps allowed the Catwitcher Mentor to survive had we not had those minor misplays there. Catwitcher, now I will play you here. To tell you the truth, let's go melee, because then you will swap over to range, and then Dryad Matron. We'll do this, give you a little bit of a boost, but at least from a damage standpoint, doesn't make much of a difference which one we're hitting. Our opponent only has 1 card remaining, so we'll see if they've been saving something big, and boost all allied units. You can do that twice, yes, but you only have 2 units out there, so that's not going to do much. And we still have the lead now, so we can play our second Catwitcher, but that will certainly be enough. Some minor misplays at the end, which could have made it a little bit more of a convincing win, but there you have it. Even when we get our Alzur and one of our Sages stolen, still able to pull off a victory here. Okay, and it is Nilfgaard will be our opponent for this next one. Okay, so our starting hand here, we do have a Sage. That is the most important unit that we have at the moment, though no Alzur. Let's get rid of Vrihedd Dragoon. And we get Alzur, okay, so that's certainly big. And then we'd like to find some other big spells to go along with it. We don't have any at the moment, other than Korathi Heatwave. So let's get rid of the Elven Swordmaster. Get another Dol Blathanna Sentry, which is helpful for the Catwitchers. We might actually want to go with a movement setup here to begin with. In which case we could get the other Catwitcher through Selective Mutation. So I think we actually save Alzur with this setup here. We can make it work. But it means that we are not necessarily going to be using our strongest possible setup in round 1. We're going to be saving that for either round 2 or round 3. So let's go with leading off with a Dol Blathanna Sentry. And let's actually boost it, because since our opponent will have access to twice the special cards, I think that it is certainly possible that they could deal a lot of damage here, but they may even still be able to take this out. But we want to try to keep this around, so that when we do start using our movement cards like the Catwitchers, they will get the extra boosts. Okay, moving one of our cards to our graveyard, went with the Dryad Matron, which is another one of those movement cards that could have potentially been useful in this round here. Though I think what we're going to do now is we're going to play the other Dol Blathanna Sentry. This way we have set up all of our movement. Then we go with either the Catwitcher next, or we go with a Selective Mutation to get us the other Catwitcher, so we can have both of them in our hand and then we can start playing them. But we'll see how our opponent starts playing here. We do have a little bit of damage, so we could start using things like Circle of Life to take out some cards. Okay, so our opponent has locked one of our Dol Blathanna Sentries, which is unfortunate because we do not have a way of removing that lock with this deck right now. But I don't necessarily think that is enough of a reason for us to stop using this strategy here, because we do still have our other Dol Blathanna Sentry that can also boost us when we start moving. think there's certainly a non-zero chance that our opponent has another one of these Van Morlehem Hunters or another source of lock. But at the moment, at least, let's use Selective Mutation. It'll give us our other Catwitcher. We can move a different card into our deck. I think maybe Adrenaline Rush is going to be kind of difficult to pull off when we have as many moving cards as we will eventually have, especially when we're going to be using Selective Mutation to create all these Witcher students, so we already have more than one card in every row. Okay, so it looks like our opponent is going to destroy our Dol Blathanna Sentry. It was a 9 strength unit, so sure, there is something to be said for that, but ultimately I think that in this game mode in particular, I think that it's easy enough to damage cards that to have to play 6 provision cost unit to make that happen, that took 2 turns to set up, feels like that may not have been the best move on our opponent's part here. We are also still in the lead. We could even pass right now if we wanted to, but I think we still have our movement set up to a certain extent. Let's get our Catwitcher out there, or at least one of them. And do we want to be damaging the range or melee row here? I don't think it matters much. Technically speaking, Van Morlehem Hunter does have 1 shield, and so if we do hit that, it means we won't be dealing immediate damage. Okay, and they're using their leader ability to lock our Catwitcher. Little do they know we actually have another one. But I think that is probably fine here because, again, we still have the lead, and we could play this other Catwitcher and continue to do what we've been doing all along. So let's go for this. Again, you can make the case we could pass here, force our opponent to play another card, and they've already used some of their leader ability. So that does mean that going forward, we'd have a decent advantage in rounds 2 and round 3, especially if they choose to play another card to actually win this round. But I think we still have enough of a setup working here. So let's keep going with what we have. So we play our Catwitcher. It will move, it'll deal damage, it'll get boosted in the process. And it will force our opponent to do something here in response. And that something is pass. So sure, we'll take the round 1 victory. Does mean that we actually did go down 1 card in the process, which is a little bit unfortunate, but that was not necessarily our best setup. We still have Alzur. We are largely at this point just looking for a way to set up Alzur, and I think at this point our opponent has no reason to suspect that we are going to play Alzur. So maybe we can catch them a little bit off guard. If we could get rid of some of their lock units like we did in round 1, then that is probably for the best. Let's get rid of the Elven Swordmaster. Adrenaline Rush is maybe a little bit more relevant now that we've used our Selective Mutations, but I think probably still looking for something else here. Catwitcher Mentor no longer is relevant now that we've used many of our other movement cards. And we drew back into a different Elven Swordmaster, so not great. We could perhaps play 1 card here and then pass. I'm thinking that's likely what we do, because that way we'd be down to 7 cards, and then we draw back up to 10 at the beginning of the next round. So we'll play our weakest card here, the Elven Swordmaster, and pass, and we hope that our opponent overcommits significantly and plays one of their best cards here when we are prepared to hand them this round. This also gives us more time to set up Alzur with a better hand. And yeah, using your second leader ability, that is totally fine. Nilfgaard does have a card that allows you to bring back your leader ability, but oh man, I was gonna say you perhaps did do exactly what we were saying we wanted you to do, overcommit in this round, but you did just steal our best card. The very card that we were hoping to use to set up Alzur, so that hurts a lot. And banishing the other card that we might have wanted to use to set up Alzur also hurts a lot. You get to play 2 Oneiromancies as well. So not only is it not in our deck, that means that you get the echoed copies, 2 of them, in round 3. So that really hurts. Alright, Kingslayer, what are you going to banish? What are you going to get rid of this time? Okay, Vrihedd Dragoon, thank you. We didn't want Vrihedd Dragoon anyway, so sure. What do we have left that we would want to use to set up Alzur? We could still use something like Royal Decree. That's, I think, our highest provision cost special card remaining. Other than that, Bekker's Rockslide is 8. Triangle within a triangle is 9. So, Morana Runestone is just 5. It's not a huge deal. Alzur's Double Cross is 8. We do still have Korathi Heatwave as well, so I suppose we do still have enough special cards that we could make it work. I think we still pass here. Our opponent is winning, so chances are that they will also immediately pass here, unless they have other things they can do to further set themselves up for a future round, though. That seems like that would be an overcommitment, unless if, well, you use that to play it on Cantarella and play another copy of Cantarella and perhaps swipe another one of our best cards, Waylay is fine. We weren't really planning on doing much with that anyway, so, if you're thinning out our worst cards, then that's okay. If you were to take any of our big special cards, then that would start to get quite concerning. Of course, without Oneiromancy, we don't have any control over which cards we draw into here. It's purely up to RNG and hoping that we can switch the cards that we do draw into the ones that we really want. Like, Elven Swordmaster is not that card. Triangle within Triangle is. Let's get rid of you. Royal Decree is also great. I think Catwitcher Mentor we'd also like to scratch. Sage is big. Okay. We have both Sages, we have Alzur, so we have all the cards that benefit from the special cards, and then we have most of, at least the special cards that we have remaining at this point. So we know that our opponent has Oneiromancy, in fact 2 of them, although we only see 1 card that has our card back right now, so we know that's Oneiromancy. I would have thought we'd see another. I don't know when they create the echoed copy if that also adopts our card back or keeps theirs, so they may only have 1? Don't know why they draw out of Oneiromancy, but okay, so now what we can do is I think we start off with the Sage, because if we do this, let's play it, and then let's deliberately move it a little bit with our leader ability to boost it slightly further, make it a little bit less vulnerable to getting destroyed by a special card, but I'm deliberately leading off with the Sage because although it is important to get this out early to benefit from the future special cards that we'll play, it's not quite as important as Alzur. So if our opponent does have any special cards to destroy a unit, then we want them to use it on this rather than on Alzur. And they are very assimilate heavy, playing a bunch of cards from our deck, playing Korathi Heatwave, and that is pretty big Nausicaa Sergeant now. And these will get boosted when they play units with Deploy, which certainly could be the case going forward. We do have 1 card in the range row here, and that may only be the case for a little bit longer, especially if our opponent continues to play spies on our side. So there's something to be said for going for an adrenaline rush here before we do find ourselves with multiple cards in either row. However, ideally we would get the other Sage down first, so that way they are both benefiting from it. So it's a little bit of a risk, but we do also have our leader ability that we can use to move cards around if necessary. So I think we can still make that happen. Here comes the Oneiromancy, and that one, they did not seem to use the one that had our own card back, so yes, they definitely do have 2 Oneiromancies then. Coup de Grace, they will use that on Korathi Heatwave. Classic combination, it is powerful. That means they will play another Korathi Heatwave and be able to play another big card from their own deck. And don't forget they get to play Oneiromancy twice, so we'll see what the second one gives us here. That's also going to be painful in all likelihood, because they can play whatever they want. And at this point, just rub it in that you get to play the card that we very much wanted. So Korathi Heatwave is first, but then they will swipe one of our Sages, presumably, with Yennefer's Invocation. That they do, the stronger of the 2. Makes sense. And they also play their Defender card, and at this point, I've lost track of how many cards they've played this turn, but sure, why not play 4, 5 cards? Okay, so they're at 36 already, which is concerning. They have played 1 more card than us, yes, but they did take away one of our engines in our other Sage. There's no getting that one back. So we could potentially use something like Korathi Heatwave to destroy the Defender and or one of the other Nausicaa Sergeants. So not too concerned about them at the moment. And also probably not a bad thing that, like we were saying before, I was expecting the damage from the special cards, but ultimately they actually swiped one of our cards. Better that they do that against the Sage rather than Alzur here. So I think at this point, we probably do more or less have to get Alzur out, because then we're going to start looking at things like our other special cards, and we want to make sure he's out for that. Maybe we could go with the Dryad Matron next, give ourselves just a little bit more time to see if our opponent has more special cards they want to do to sabotage us. Try to make sure that those don't end up happening to Alzur. The one concern I have here, and it's a big one, would be that if they do take out Alzur, then we are in serious trouble. If Alzur sticks around, then I do think our chances are still pretty strong here. And there's perfect example. They're looking to lock a unit, so they're probably going to do that. Oh, I was going to say they should have done that to the Sage, technically speaking. The Sage will get boosted by 2 every turn, whereas the Dryad Matron will only boost by 1. They don't know that basically every card in our hand right now is a special, because like I was saying before, we haven't really shown them very much of our deck at the moment. So at this point, I think it is the point of no return. We have to put down Alzur. And we could deliberately double Guerilla Tactics. I think we do, just to give him a little bit more strength here. Again, the idea there being that if our opponent does have any direct damage, we're making it more difficult for our opponent to take him out. This will certainly still draw a lot of attention. So they do have a way to sabotage Alzur, and it appears as though they may, then they're going to pull it out now. And it is, to destroy a unit with 9 or more strength. I was gonna say, if they have something like Geralt of Rivia or a Leo, then that does allow them to destroy a unit that is more powerful. That was the risk we took. It was a matter of, what do we think is more likely? A special card that was going to have direct damage, or a unit like Geralt of Rivia or Leo Boneheart, and it turns out they had Leo. So I stand by the decision that we made, because in this seasonal event, more likely that they would be leaning toward the special cards, but that hurts big time. So now we are out of our leader ability, no more ability to move cards to different rows, so I think we need to Adrenaline Rush here. Otherwise, this is not going to work in the future. It is going to give us a ton of boosts, and that is why the Sage is definitely preferable to the Dryad Matron, and why they should have locked this rather than this. In fact, this is going to get boosted by 4 every turn, because we're going to play 2 special cards. Okay, they're going to destroy a unit with a status, which will be the unit that we just boosted, so that is unfortunate. But again, we will still have the Sage continuing to grow. So that is the hope here, is to make that carry us. Triangle within a triangle. Let's just think about what the target's going to be here. We could either have it be something to damage opponents or boost ourselves. At this point, our opponent does have a reasonable amount of strength. We don't have much. Our highest provision cost unit would be Hokim Duet. I think we might actually want to use it on Hokim Duet. Not sure we do it right now. Let's just see Royal Decree. What would we draw ourselves into? Because we don't have many units remaining. In fact, remember, we play this twice, so we are playing both those units. I think we want to wait on that, though, because units are vulnerable, as we were seeing before. So why don't we start dealing some damage instead, and maybe we even go with Korathi Heatwave, because these cards are just going to get stronger. Get rid of the defender. Let's get rid of you. And suddenly this deficit doesn't look nearly as insurmountable as it once did. So there's the other Oneiromancy that they stole from us. This time they get to play another copy of the last tactic card they played. What was it? Unless we destroy that card, which we do have the means to make happen. So I think we probably will. Okay, resetting the Sage is unfortunate, yes, though it is still going to get higher. So the timing is not as bad as it could have been there. I think we absolutely use Circle of Life here to destroy Stefan. Otherwise, I don't remember what the last tactic was, but presumably it was good. Let's do this. Alright, and Hunting Pack will summon the other copy onto the playing field if any of our units have a status. We certainly do. So that's an 8 strength play, which is something, but ultimately it does really look like this opponent that we're playing against has a primarily unit-based deck, not a lot of special cards, so I'm not sure they've customized this for the seasonal event per se. Now, tell you the truth. Okay, so this is bad. We have Royal Decree, which will allow us to play a unit from our deck. We will play this twice, so we will play both units from our deck. We only have 2 units in our deck, so that means Alzur's Double Cross will have nothing to play from our deck. This is, yeah, that means one of these cards is basically a dead card. I suppose let's go Triangle within a Triangle for now. Well, either way, we're going to have either our units that we currently have out get targeted, or the units that we're about to play get targeted. I suppose let's go for you. Get you in the melee row, and then you also in the melee row. If you have enough time to actually play this, yes. We'll get boosted by the number of cards here. That does bring us close to our opponent, yes. The one thing that we can still do with Alzur's Double Cross is we can still play it twice, even if it does nothing, which will still boost the Sage 2 times round for a total of 4 points, so that is something, but given how close this is, that may be the difference between a victory or defeat. Okay, and they're damaging neighboring units by 3, and it does have a deploy ability, so it is also continuing to boost the Nausicaa Sergeant. Unfortunately, we don't have a great way of getting rid of this anymore, got rid of the other one with our Heatwave. Triangle Within a Triangle is certainly our best card remaining. At this point, I was thinking we would boost Hokum to Wet with that, but I think what we want to do is we actually might want to save Triangle Within Triangle for that, because I think that's going to catch our opponents off guard. They're not going to want to destroy the Hokum to Wets. They have no reason to try to do that now, so I think we just do the throwaway Alzur's Double Cross. Like I said, doesn't have any units left to draw from our deck, but it will allow us to boost the Sage, and then we can also use the Elven Swordmaster to deal a little bit of damage. Doesn't really matter who we hit here, I don't think. But our opponent's previous turn was certainly better than our previous turn. We'll see what their last card is. And I don't think this is going to make a big difference here. Gets them up to 43. So I do think that means that Triangle Within Triangle will be enough for us to take it here. So let's use it on a Hokum to Wet, because let's just do a quick confirmation here. We want to boost a unit based on whichever has the highest provision cost, that's how much they're going to get boosted by. It's 5 for the Cat Witcher Mentor, 4 for you, 10 for you, so I think this is going to be the target, 6 for you, obviously another 10 for the other Hokum to Wet, 5 for the Dryad Matron, and then just 4 for the Elven Swordmaster. So yes, definitely use this on Hokum to Wet, and we get to use it twice. One of them would be enough, especially since it also boosts the Sage, because we boost that every time we use a special card, but there you have it. It is enough. So Nilfgaard, nearly enough to sabotage our deck here and throw us off from being able to play all of our special card synergies, but still, even with that, able to pull off a victory there. So there's a look at the deck for the new dual casting seasonal event. Unfortunately, our Alzurs, the card that deck was largely based around, either got destroyed or stolen immediately, but if you are to play this deck, then hopefully you'll get the chance to have some fun with the chaos that ensues when you spawn your own Keltulluses or other powerful cards like that. If you liked the video, then make sure to hit the like and subscribe button, and leave a comment down below to let me know what you think the best setup would be for this new seasonal event. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.